Hello, all of you. I warmly welcome all of you in this audio storybook Random Stories. Name of today's story is Unhappy Girlfriend. The setting sun increasing the charm of the big bamboo house designed in a traditional style, with a thatched roof, bamboo walls, and little land around it, where there are trees and plants and wide road of mud. The air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and the sound of birds. It was a peaceful evening, but inside one of the rooms of the house, a young man Pranay was busy in writing something on big leaves putting on a table-like structure made of mud, in front of him. The room was simple, with a few shelves holding books and a soft seat on the ground where the Pranay was sitting. He had wrapped a white dhoti around his waist, and a tie was tied slightly crooked on his head, with a Rudrakshare garland wrapped around it. His eyes were focused on the table, and his hand moved swiftly. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a Sakhi stormed in, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you ignore me?" she shouted, her voice echoing in the room. Pranay looked up, surprised. He was engrossed in his work, so he had not heard her approach. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in," he said, his voice calm and measured. Sakhi stamped her foot. "You never hear me. You're always so busy with your writing. I can't take it anymore," she exclaimed, tears starting to form in her eyes. Pranay put down his pen and looked at her, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. Sakhi took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. "I love you, but I can't be with someone who doesn't have time for me. If you don't start paying attention to me, I'll have to leave you and find someone who will," she said, her voice trembling. Pranay looked at her, his heart heavy with sadness. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was that bad. I'll try to make more time for you," he said, his voice soft and sincere. Sakhi shook her head. "It's too late. I can't keep waiting for you. Goodbye," she said, turning on her heel and storming out of the room, leaving Pranay alone with his thoughts. Pranay sat there for a while, staring at the door. He felt a pang of regret and guilt in his heart. He loved the Sakhi deeply, but he was so passionate about his work that he often lost track of time. He knew he had to make a change if he wanted to keep her in his life. He got up from the soft seat and walked over to the window, looking out at the little land around the house. The trees and plants swayed gently in the breeze, and the sun was now setting, casting long shadows over the road of mud. He saw the similar house on the other side of the road and wondered about the people who lived there. He knew that he had to talk to the Sakhi and make things right. He walked out of the room and down the wide road of mud, his bare feet sinking into the soft earth. He approached the similar house and knocked on the door. Sakhi opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. Pranay took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. Can we sit down and talk?" he asked, his voice steady. Sakhi hesitated for a moment before nodding and leading him to a small room. They sat down on the soft seat on the ground, and Pranay began to speak. "I'm sorry for neglecting you and not realizing how much I've been taking you for granted," Pranay said, looking into the Sakhi's eyes. "I know that my work is important to me, but you are important too. I don't want to lose you." The Sakhi looked at him, her eyes softening. I love you, but I can't keep feeling like I'm second place to your work, she said, her voice sad. Pranaya nodded. I understand. I will make more of an effort to prioritize you in our relationship, he said, his voice filled with determination. Saki smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen on her face in a long time. I appreciate that. I don't want to lose you either, she said, reaching out to hold his hand. They sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Pranaya thought about how much he loved the Saki and how much he wanted to make things right between them. I have an idea, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Why don't we take a break from our lives here and go on a trip together? We can go somewhere new and just focus on each other. Saki looked at him, surprised. Where would we go? She asked. Pranaya smiled. I've heard of a beautiful island not too far from here. It's supposed to be secluded and peaceful. We could rent a little cabin and just enjoy each other's company. Saki's eyes lit up. That sounds amazing, she said, excitement creeping into her voice. Pranaya stood up, pulling her up with him. Let's do it. Let's take a break from our lives and just focus on us, he said, pulling her close and kissing her first on the forehead then on lips. They spent the next few days making arrangements for their trip. They left the bamboo house, walking down the wide road of mud towards a new adventure. The island was everything they had hoped for and more. They spent their days exploring the beaches, swimming in the ocean, and hiking through the lush forests. They talked for hours, reconnecting and sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. As the days went by, Pranaya realized that he had never been happier. He had finally found a balance between his work and his love for Saki. He knew that he never wanted to take her for granted again. On their last night on the island, Pranaya took the Saki out to a secluded beach, where they watched the sun set over the ocean. He got down on one knee and pulled out a small ring made by him on the island using soft but strong and beautiful herbs which last for many years without losing its softness and beauty. Will you marry me? He asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Saki looked at him, tears in her eyes. Yes, I will, she said, throwing her arms around him. After that Pranaya moved her figure inside the ring. And also gifted her beautiful costly golden ring. They returned to the bamboo house as an engaged couple, ready to start a new chapter in their lives together. Pranaya continued to rock, but he always made sure to make time for the Saki, knowing that she was the most important thing in his life. As they sat on the soft seat on the ground of their room, Pranaya looked at the table where he had been working before the Saki had stormed in. He realized that he had been working on a love story all along, but he had never realized that he was living it. Pranaya couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. He had been so consumed with writing about love and relationships that he had almost let his own slip away from him. But now, sitting there with the Saki he loved more than anything in the world, he turned to her, taking her hand in his. I'm so grateful for you, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Saki smiled at him, her eyes shining with love. I'm grateful for you too, she replied. They sat there in silence for a few moments, simply enjoying each other's company. Pranaya's mind wandered back to his work, and he couldn't help but feel inspired by his own love story. I think I'm going to write a book, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Saki looked at him, surprised. A book? She asked. Pranaya nodded. Yes, a book about our journey together. About how we almost lost each other, but found our way back. I want to share our story with the world, he said, his voice filled with determination. Saki smiled at him, her eyes sparkling with pride. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said. And so, Pranaya spent the next few months pouring his heart and soul into his writing. He wrote about their trip to the secluded island, about the moments of doubt and uncertainty, and about the overwhelming love that had brought them back together. When the book was finished, Pranaya handed it to the Saki, his heart pounding with nervousness. She read it in one sitting, tears streaming down her face as she relived their journey through his words. It's beautiful, she said, looking up at him with tears still in her eyes. Thank you for sharing our story with the world. She named the book as The Young Couple's Love Story. As time went on, the young couple continued to live in their bamboo house, surrounded by nature and the peace it brought them. Their love continued to grow and evolve. Years passed, and the young couple grew old together, still holding hands and gazing at each other with the same love and adoration they had always felt. As the sun set on their final day together, Pranaya held his wife's hand and looked at her with tears in his eyes. Thank you for loving me, he whispered. The Saki smiled at him, her eyes filled with the same love and affection that had been there all those years ago. Thank you for loving me, she replied. And as they closed their eyes for the final time, surrounded by the memories of a lifetime spent together, they knew that they had found their happily ever after. A love that had endured through the years, and would continue to live on in the hearts and souls of all those who had been touched by their story. The young couple's love story continued to inspire people long after they had passed away. Their bamboo house became a symbol of their enduring love and commitment, and it became a pilgrimage site for people looking to experience the same kind of love. People came to the house to propose to their loved ones, to renew their vows, and to celebrate the power of love in all its forms. Visitors could see the mud table where Pranaya had written his love story, the soft seat on the ground where they had sat and talked for hours on end, and the garland of Rudraksha beads that Pranaya had worn on his head. After very long time when civilization developed very much, both Pranaya and Saki born again. And after completing undergraduate degree, they taken admission in postgraduate course in the college which is established in the same city where bamboo house become a symbol of their enduring love and commitment. They both see each other first time in this birth in the college. Pranaya always sit on the last bench in the classroom. But after a month he feel that he is always seen the Saki. Saki is distraction for him. He try to neglect her. But he failed, and one day he call her by his mobile. Saki pick the call, he said to the Saki that I did not know why I call you, I did not know what I will talk with you. The Saki start the conversation and they both conversate more than 1 hour on mobile in first call. Pranaya and Saki were both surprised by their instant connection. They had a lot in common, despite their different backgrounds and beliefs. They both loved literature, music, and art, and they shared a deep appreciation for the natural world. Over the next few weeks, they talked on the phone every day, and they started to spend more time together in person. They would meet in the library to study, or they would go for long walks in the park, talking and laughing and sharing their hopes and dreams. Despite their differences, they both knew that they were meant to be together. They felt a deep connection that transcended everything else, and they knew that they would face whatever challenges came their way, together. And as they walked through the city, hand in hand, they knew that their love story was just beginning. As they walked past place where the bamboo house exists in the past, they felt a sense of peace and joy wash over them. And as they looked into each other's eyes, they knew that they had found their happily ever after, at last. Pranay sometime alone visit to the place where bamboo house exists. When he visit alone he gets some glimpse of his previous birth with Sakhi. Year passed by, they finished their postgraduate degree. Sakhi had continued her studies and had become successful in her career, but Pranay did not get good job and struggle a lot in career. Sakhi's success had created a rift between them, and they had slowly drifted apart. They no longer talked to each other, and Pranay felt like he was living in a different world from Sakhi. Pranay was heartbroken. He couldn't understand how Sakhi could be so cold and distant, especially since they had spent so much time together. But as time passed, Pranay began to understand that their paths had diverged. One day, as Pranay was sitting in his rented small apartment, he received a call from an old friend. The friend had a job opportunity for him in a different city, and Pranay realized that he needed to make a change. He packed his bags and left without saying goodbye to Sakhi. Years passed, and Pranay became successful in his new job. But he never forgot about Sakhi. One day, he decided to visit the bamboo house one last time. As he walked through the door, he saw Sakhi sitting on the soft seat on the ground, surrounded by the memories of their past life. She looked up at him, and for a moment, Pranay thought that she had finally remembered. But then, she stood up and walked past him, without a word. Pranay realized that their story had come to an end. He walked out of the bamboo house, knowing that he had found his happily ever after, but that Sakhi had moved on without him. As day turned into months and as months turned into years, Pranay was going busy in earning money and establishing his own firm. Only day when he was sitting in his apartment and preparing proposal in his apartment, he heard a knock at the door but did not notice it, but door is also not locked. He again heard a knock at door but did not notice it and still busy in his work. After a little gap of silence, suddenly, the door burst open, and a Sakhi stormed in, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you ignore me?" she shouted, her voice echoing in the room. Pranay looked up, surprised. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in," he said, in frightening voice. Sakhi stamped her foot. "You never hear me. You're always so busy with your stuff," she exclaimed, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Pranay, I know it's been a long time, but I had to see you," Sakhi said, her eyes brimming with tears. Pranay felt a surge of emotion wash over him. He had thought about this moment so many times, but he never imagined it would actually happen. Both sat down on the couch and their eyes locked in an intense gaze. "I never stopped thinking about you, Pranay. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry," Sakhi said, her voice barely above a whisper. Pranay looked at her, his heart breaking all over again. He wanted to forgive her, to believe that they could start over, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too little, too late. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sakhi. You left me when I needed you the most," Pranay said, his voice choked with emotion. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I had to try. I had to see if there was still a chance for us, Sakhi said, her eyes pleading with Pranaya to understand. They sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in their own thoughts. Pranaya knew that he still loved Sakhi, but he didn't know if he could trust her again. Sakhi knew that she had made a mistake, but she didn't know how to make it right. As they looked at each other, Pranaya felt a flicker of hope in his heart. Maybe there was still a chance for them, he thought. Maybe they could find their happily ever after all. But first, they would have to find a way to forgive each other and move on from the past. So, they started as they meet for the first time. Sakhi, hi, I'm Sakhi. I have a postgraduate degree from a reputed university and a successful career. Pranaya, nice to meet you, Sakhi. I'm Pranaya. I also have a postgraduate degree from a reputed university and a successful career, although not as successful as yours. I'm working hard to establish my own firm, and it's going well so far. It's a pleasure to meet someone as accomplished as you. Sakhi, thank you, Pranaya. It's great to meet someone with similar aspirations. Pranaya, can I prepare lunch for you? I'm pretty good in the kitchen. Sakhi, yes, of course, but let me help you. Pranaya, you're beautiful, Sakhi. I have this feeling that I could fall in love with you, especially if we cook together. Sakhi, I would love that. I want to be tied to you in love. After they finished cooking lunch together, both Sakhi and Pranaya decided to take a walk outside in the evening. Pranaya, it's been so hard, how can we possibly make this work? You're up in the mountains and I'm down here. Sakhi, but have you ever stopped to admire the beauty of nature? It's the boss of us all. Suddenly, Pranaya swiftly stepped in front of Sakhi and began to walk backwards, never taking his eyes off of her. Sakhi, why are you walking like that? Pranaya, I want to see you while walking with you. When I walk beside you, I cannot keep my eyes off you. Sakhi, giggles, you are so sweet. Pranaya, smiling, I think I am falling for you. Sakhi, teasingly, oh really? Is it confirmed now? Suddenly, Pranaya loses his balance and falls down, and they both burst out laughing. Pranaya, laughing, you got me. Yes, it's confirmed. Pranaya and Sakhi embarked on a new journey together, filled with love, passion, and commitment. They were grateful for the second chance at happiness that life had given them. They changed their career line and started working in new city where they are unknown for everyone and everyone is unknown for them. They bought a cozy house in a quiet, isolated area surrounded by trees and a small garden. The couple enjoyed their peaceful and serene surroundings, cherishing each moment they spent together. In their humble abode, they decorated the walls with paintings they had created, had a simple sofa, a wooden dining table, and a few chairs. The bed was covered with a soft green bed sheet, and there were curtains on the windows that let in just enough light to brighten up the room. Pranaya and Sakhi spent their evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, sharing their thoughts, dreams, and aspirations. They valued every moment they spent together and were grateful for their time. They lived their lives to the fullest and cherished the freedom to be themselves without worrying about societal expectations. They were happy living in their unconventional relationship, hidden from society. In public places, they met as strangers, and Pranaya flirted with Sakhi, but she responded with a sweet smile, ignoring his advances. As they grew older, they realized that they had created a beautiful love story, unique to them. They were aware that their time together was coming to an end, and they knew that their love had endured through multiple lifetimes. They had found their happily ever after, and now it was time for them to return to the universe from which they came.